Now, this statement here literally frames the work of school boards, and it's something that every board member in Michigan is asked to follow. The role of the Board of Education is not to run the schools, but to see that they are well run. So I'll give you background on that. And this is how the Michigan Association of School Boards says it. We are the professional association to which school board members in Michigan belong, just about all of them, actually. So when we say that they're well run, let me share with you where that information comes from. But to start, Oakland area is one of the largest geographic leagues in the state. And the map that you're looking at here, this is the best one we could find, literally shows all of the school boards in the Tri-County area. We're still working on trying to isolate Oakland County, but I think you know where we are in the upper left-hand corner of this graphic. There are 27 local leagues in Oakland area, but actually 29, because the entire area is covered by the intermediate school district, and you'll hear me reference that a bit later. And I'll also be sharing a link as well. Now, Kathy and I are also planning on sharing this slide deck in a handout with you, so you'll have that information as well. So in addition to the 27 local leagues that we directly support, there also is the overall Oakland Schools, which is a service agency. And then we actually have members in our area that are members of who live in the Troy School District, which is served directly by LWV Troy. And it's very likely that we'll need to serve that as well because of our members who are in LWV Troy's area. And you can see by looking at this map, some of the districts are very small and in more of an urban area. And many of our districts take in much more geography as you move out all across Oakland County. To kick things off, here is the oath of office. And for this, I'm going to ask you to listen for exactly what roles our school board members ask. And this one I'll read. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education of our school district to the best of my ability. In listening to this, school board members are reminded there is a reference to your school district, but the allegiance is to the Constitution of the country and the Constitution of the state. And that is where our authority comes from, as well as from Michigan laws. So you'll hear me even personalize it because I do work directly with school boards. I do take it very personally here. But what is key would be for us to know what are the prominent laws that direct the specific duties, responsibilities. Now, this is not about becoming an expert in the school code or the School Aid Act, but it is about understanding the nuances, the key bullet points in the Open Meetings Act. By the way, I give a reference so that if any of you are inclined and want to see what the Open Meetings Act is all about, you know, even in state law legalese, it's only about 5 or 6 pages. There are a few other laws that would direct school boards and school districts, but these are the 3 dominant ones. Out of the School Aid Act and the school code literally come the list in front of you of the roles and responsibilities of the superintendent and the role and responsibility of the board. The school board will never, and I emphasize never, will never be meeting without the superintendent present. As a matter of fact, here are a couple of terms that you might even hear referenced when board members are deliberating at the board table. You might hear them refer to themselves as the governance team, or they may refer to themselves as the board leadership team. In Oakland County, all of our boards have 7 members, but the board leadership team is 8 because we include the superintendent and the board members. For every action, for every role of the school board, there is a coordinating, supportive, partnering role of the superintendent. And this slide is designed specifically to show this. Now, some of you might even want additional information, and included in this slide deck as well will be the source of this information. So the Professional Association for School Boards literally reads the entire School Aid Act, the entire school code, and isolates, well, what are school boards supposed to be doing? What ought the conversation at the board table be about? So you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 8 bullets. I needed to count because I added an extra that was omitted from the original list. So you'll get this very much. Well, don't boards have goals? Well, of course they do. Well, what is the superintendent's role? To assist and advise the board in setting those goals. And then who adopts them? The board. Well, what about policy? They're intricate policies to make sure that everything happens. Does the board decide to go home and do its own homework and write the policies? Absolutely not. The board is tasking the superintendent with that job. So you see the verb here, advise. Well, the third obligation, well, what does the superintendent do? Manage operations. The superintendent is in charge of all of the day-to-day operations. Well, and then what about the school board? How many employees does the school board have? Let me tell you, school board members know this. There is one person they hire and evaluate, and it's only the superintendent. So basically what that means is the conversation at the board table will be one of deliberations between the policymakers, those who are elected, and the superintendent, the individual that is selected. And that's actually language that will be used in training and preparing board members for their role. So as you see here, some of the meetings that we will be attending will have, every meeting we attend is going to have at least some component of one, if not multiple, elements on the list here. One to note is when it comes to the budget. Well, does the school board pull out its sharp pen and calculators and computer files? Absolutely not. It is the responsibility of the superintendent to draft an appropriate budget to meet the goals and needs of the district, and it will then be the responsibility of the school board to approve that. One of the very special meetings during the year will be the budget hearing. It will be noticed, publicly noticed, and we'll say a little bit about that later. And it will be a specific time when the public has been asked to look at the budget information that has been drafted by the superintendent and prior to being approved. Now, that doesn't mean that the school board hasn't seen the budget. Of course they have. There will be many working sessions before getting to that. So the other areas that school boards concentrate on do include curriculum, do include staffing and appraisal. You might ask, well, if I said the school board only hires one person, What is the school board's role in staffing and appraisal? State law tells school board members, Michigan state law, that they must assure that a system is in place in the district to evaluate staff. Does that mean the school board evaluates anyone other than the superintendent? Absolutely not, but they are to make sure that staffing, appraisal, and appraisal systems are in place. Might we hear a school board adopt a motion that hires staff? Yes, we will. And when that board is adopting that motion to hire principals and teachers and bus drivers and maintenance staff and any other contract, they will be voting on a recommendation directly from the superintendent, because the superintendent will have processed all of the requirements and all of the work to see that happens. So the same pattern follows through with facilities. And the bullet that I added, and this is a key element, is board self-assessment. A hallmark of effective leaders is to hold a mirror up and look at themselves. Well, the superintendent does not participate in that directly, but the superintendent would assure that the board has the resources and supports so that they can do that self-assessment. There's an awful lot here. We're not expecting any of us to memorize all of this, but we wanted to set context as to what might be the nature of deliberations at the board table. And I use that word deliberation very specifically because that is what state law says school boards are doing. They're deliberating. Well, these next couple of slides say a bit more. So what I just shared in the list with the dual column is what Michigan state law specifically says boards are to do. Well, what's this one? What do effective boards do? The emphasis here is on the word effective. And you see a bright yellow asterisk. This is all about, and what does the research say effective boards do? Some of you might be interested in this, and also included in these in this material will be a link so that if any of you want to dig a little bit deeper, you'll be able to see that. So a number of years ago, a major effort was conducted looking at districts of all sizes, all kinds, all over the country, looking at student academic achievement without regard for whether it was a rural or urban or inner city or whatever description. If the if student academics were high, these 8 bullet points that I'll share are the characteristics of those boards. And I'll just highlight the information that is underlined. There is a vision of high expectations held by the entire governance team. Everyone is accountability driven. There are clearly identified shared beliefs and values. And by the way, some of us, when we're observing, will hear boards talking about their strategic plan efforts, and that's what this is about: strong shared beliefs and values, where boards collectively look at what is important in that district. And it's also equally important to have collaborative relationships all across the district. And by the way, here's just a really quick factoid. There is actually data that tells us one of the key indicators, an additional indicator of student success, and it has to do with how long the superintendent stays in service in a specific district. So many of us might even see difficulties that pop up in terms of relationships. And when those relationships issues exist, it means that there is a direct hit to student academic achievement. This is the other 4. In today's environment, districts and boards must be data savvy, and school board members are asked to tie their decisions to the data being made available to them. They're also asked to align and sustain resources, meaning what decisions have to be made at the board table to assure that the goals are being supported, and to obtain additional resources through bonds or millages or or other efforts. School boards are also expected to lead as a united team. Many of us are going to see that, and some of us are going to not see that. So what does it mean to lead as a united team? And then this last one is equally important, and it has to do, is the governance team, meaning the elected officials and the superintendent, are they taking part in specific activities that contribute directly to team development and their own personal learning? When we introduce the oath of office, the last 5 words of the oath of office are the best of my ability. Board members are not expected to be accomplished educators. They are not expected to come in knowing curriculum or knowing the mechanics of the transportation system. Board members are expected to ask the questions to lay out a foundation so that the one staff they hire is actually able to lead development of all of those elements. You know, Kathy, as I look at time, I think we're doing pretty good. So what I think I'd like to do is see, is there a question or two that may have come up now in hearing about, well, what are boards supposed to do?
So Judy put a note in the chat saying, just pointing out that some people may not realize that school boards are not paid, that these are volunteer positions.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Kathy. I can go for that. I can.
Thanks, Judy.
You know what? And I have to admit, I'm not, you must have access to that because I didn't see that one, but I'll comment. Not only are boards not paid, there are a few boards that have a token stipend, a token of $30 per meeting. And do you know what most board members do? They roll that back and make a contribution to the district. Yes. So this is not a salaried position. I do see someone, is it Bajaya?
Yeah.
With a question. What's your, would you open your mic and let me know your question?
Yes. My question is this about the policy of the board, or it's written by the superintendent. So what happens if there is a disagreement between the thoughts of the superintendent and the board?
Okay.
I have served on a couple of boards. It's usually the board that sets the policies.
Okay. Now, here's how this sounds, and then here's how this works. The board does adopt the policies, but board members don't go home and say, okay, we need some policies about curriculum. All right, so I'm going to write the part about math because I used to love math, and I'm going to write this other part here. The board starts with their shared vision and values. There are some standard policies that districts are expected to have. Boards take advantage of professional networks to do that. Now, also included, anticipating a question like that, I indicated in an additional resource slide at the end where any of us can find the policies of the boards we're going to be observing. Every district that and I don't go into all of them, but every district that where I have looked at their website, it is possible to find their policy documents right on their website. These are all publicly accessible. The very first policy block will be the bylaws of the Board of Education itself. All of the rest are specific sections about curriculum, about transportation, about employment. Now, to go specifically to your question, it is expected that the governance team, meaning all 8, have full and complete discussion or deliberation about policies before they are adopted. So it is not that the superintendent writes a policy and the board must adopt it. The board may say, and I can give you an example. Cell phones are the norm today. But going back, 20 years, cell phones were not the norm. Board members in some districts said, cell phones in students' hands will be distracting. So many districts adopted a no cell phone policy. They discussed it first. Does this make sense? Asked the superintendent to get the policy drafted. That could have happened in the district, or it could have happened with the support of one of the policy services. And by the way, there are a number of law firms that specialize in school district policy development. Draft a policy, review it by the board, and each board will have their own procedure for how many reads, for how long they will review a policy before adopting it. But it is clearly expected that the governance team, the superintendent, and the board will work to a consensus as to what should be in the policy.
So Karen had a question about our school board members linked to a party.
I'll put it this way. All school boards are officially and legally nonpartisan. A number of years ago, and I'm absolutely confident that in our advocacy work, the League of Women Voters of Michigan was not in support of this. The Michigan legislature changed when elections for school districts would happen. School elections used to be every May. Some of us will remember that first, the legislature removed the May election. Then the legislature required elections every 2 years. There were some pundits who believed that changing the election to every other even year put the school board elections on a parallel path with partisan positions. I already know this is going to happen. There will be some local political parties that will be endorsing school board candidates. That happened as a direct result of the change in election dates. There also were efforts to put school board elections in odd years when they would not have been along with partisan elections. The legislature rejected that. So there were intentional decisions made in Lansing to put school board elections in November when they would be in the mix with partisan elections. I don't know a single I don't know No, I don't know any school board member that prefers that. So couldn't elections for school nonpartisan issues be at a different time of the year? This is in the hands of the state legislature and is not a decision of boards themselves. You know what? And Kathy, I'm not, I have my chat open and I'm not seeing the question. So if you could go on.
Judy has her hand raised.
Oh,
so
yes, Judy, please.
Yes.
I was just going to add to what you've said for clarification for some folks that the superintendent who brings forth the policies to the board to be approved, the superintendent may have worked with a large group, a committee for a year on this. So it's not just the superintendent who's figuring these things out. It's always a large group. And so as people are observing school board meetings, they may see a big presentation by this group who represents the superintendent.
Judy, thank you for adding that. As a matter of fact, that you open the door to another element. We will actually hear reports from committees, and there will be a number of boards that have named a specific policy committee where professional staff as well as board members would have been part of that. So Judy, thanks for clarifying that. And by the way, but as we start to hear topics presented in different ways, I'm more than delighted to answer any questions as they come up. This is the area where I'm hanging out a lot these days. No, this is my job actually, but here I'm a volunteer member of the League of Women Voters, and it's a delight to be able to share any insights that I can. Other questions?
No, I don't have any more questions on
Okay, so I'll keep going. So this was the part about what literally is the role of the board. Okay. Now we go into how do boards meet in the first place. And this is, by the way, those graphics are intended to be suns. The Open Meetings Act will sometimes be referred to as the Sunshine Law. As a matter of fact, the Sunshine Week is a big deal in the League of Women Voters. And by the way, in our Observer Corps manual, our work literally was born out of wanting to know more about how local and state and all government works, and it is tied very, very much to the Sunshine Laws, and in Michigan, the Open Meetings Act. So these next several pages pull out specific highlights that we will see in action in board meetings. The current Attorney General has updated the handbook, the Michigan handbook for the Open Meetings Act, and I've also included information here as to how any of you who wish to have that. We're not saying you have to, but so you'll have some background. Here's a nuance about that very first bullet. Yes, meetings must be open to the public. And that means if there's a fire door, that door has to be propped open, or that door has to have a sign on it that says open meeting, come on in. And what is a meeting? This is continually discussed. It's a meeting where a quorum is present. And in a little bit, I have a note about could the quorum change? And actually it could. The quorum for a school board will be 4. Now, what that brings up is, does that mean if 3 board meetings are meeting in a committee, is that committee meeting an open meeting? Well, you know what? I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but a meeting of 3 people could be an open meeting. And if it is, school boards know to post those as well. It is not an open meeting with 3 people if that group of 3 is coming up with options you know, 3 options to answer this question. But if the group of 3 with an administrator is coming up with a solution, or not a solution, but a recommendation back to the board, that meeting will have had to be publicly noticed. Now, also a chance meeting. There will be community events. I know I'm going to be at a two community events this week, and I know there will be bunches of school board members there because they run into one another, and therefore having a cup of coffee together at one event or gathering at a student activity, is that a meeting? No, it's a chance gathering. And that would be the same if board members were at a conference together as well. So I've already referenced the advisory part. Advisory would not qualify. I've already referenced all decisions. So what that means, the school board member's workplace is only when they are at that board table. The individual school board member by themselves has no authority to make a decision unless they are with their peers in a meeting called for the purpose of deliberating. This is something that I just added to our slide deck. And because we're starting our process we're starting our observer corps system right at election time, there are going to be school board members that may not know as much as we now know about how things operate. So I wanted to make sure, so here's an opportunity to keep us up to speed. How many votes does it take to prevail? There is one answer and one answer only. No matter how many people are present, there must be 4 votes for any issue to prevail. And here's the example. It's a 7-member board. I'm not counting the superintendent here because the superintendent isn't voting, but when it comes to votes, there will be 7. Someone is out of town, and someone unfortunately has to stay home with a child who doesn't feel well. That means there are 5 members at that board table. That's realistic, and that could happen. An issue comes up for vote, and there are 3 people that say yes and 2 people that say no. Well, Deb, 3 is more than 2. That's correct, but can that vote prevail? According to Michigan law, it cannot, because all prevailing votes at a board table must be a minimum of 4. And there's another reference, and I'll be going into the closed session situations in just a minute. On occasion, there might be 5 votes required to prevail. There are 8 applicable reasons for a board to go into an executive or to a closed session. That's going to come up in a minute, and I'll show you what those are, because we're going to possibly hear these in meetings, and there are unique behaviors of boards around them. For some of the issues going into closed session, 5 members have to agree to go not on the issue, but have to agree to go into the closed session. So some of us are going to see a motion to go into closed session by the board, and only 4 people want to go into closed session to discuss that matter. Can that happen? If it's a unique reason that requires 5 votes, that closed session that session must either happen in the sunshine or it won't happen at all. But some of us are going to be in boards where we're observing that. Now, the second question in the middle, well, does the quorum ever change? Well, you know what? On occasion, it can. It will probably be rare. There is a requirement in the school code that if a sitting board member is going to be voting on a contract where they have a family member in that contract, that individual is not able to be counted as the quorum. All of this will be explained at the board table, but I wanted to set it up so that if any of us run into that, it would be, we will at least have heard a little bit about it. Many boards will have someone who is an elected official who may have a spouse, a son, a sister, brother, who is working in the district. And that's specifically, the state legislature put this in specifically so that there would be no personal financial conflict of interest. Now, I alluded to this just a little bit ago. What documents are available and where are they? In today's age of technology, there is great information made available, literally, on district websites. And some of you may be saying, well, are they all in the same place? Not hardly. Each board is its own corporation. Each district is its own corporation and has their own way to post notices, their own way to take minutes, their own way to share information. But the typical documents that we can absolutely expect for any school district in any public school district, we're just looking at the public schools, to be able to find the minutes, the agendas, the bylaws. All bylaws of a district will be the first section of their policy deck, literally. And when we have our specific assignments, it might be really interesting to go through and find some of these. And I would say, especially the bylaws of the board. The board calendar will be there, and some districts make the board operations manual or their handbook a public document. I just found a couple that I wasn't aware of, and that gives us insight into the kind of decisions that will be made. And some, their strategic plan as well. All right, a few more pieces here. Here are the different options that boards have to go into closed session. But I should stop and say it this way. 99% of every deliberation made by a school board should be made in the sunshine. And there's something I hear often, many of us will hear this. Oh, this is such a sensitive issue. We don't want to talk about it in public. Do school boards get to do that? Flat out, no. So one of the challenges school board members and superintendents at the board table literally have to work at how to have tough conversations about sensitive issues. And it's only the 1% that are the most sensitive that can be discussed in a closed session. You know what, Kathy, are you able to see the whole screen of everyone here? I wanted to ask a question. Has anyone here ever observed a school board go into closed session?
So yes, Karen has.
Okay. Oh, and Judy has raised her hand. Okay, of course.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Karen and Judy, share an observation, would you? So Karen, how about you first? What did you notice when the board went into closed session?
They make a motion and they read the whatever
Whatever, right?
rule, law, I don't know what you want to call it, but they read the law and says that they will be going into closed session. And then if you're watching it, the screen goes to like a logo or something until the board comes back.
Right. And you know what? You mentioned all the pieces. So let's hear from Judy, and then I'll debrief what you've shared. So Judy, what would you share with everyone about what you've observed?
I would basically reiterate what Karen said. It's a time when they meet and it's not public. And so they may have some sensitive information to deal with that it shouldn't be shared with the general public. And then sometimes what they come back and give you a report, and sometimes they don't.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Judy, for that. The key word is sensitive. And when you see these reasons, and I won't read the whole thing, but I went through and put in bold and then underline, keywords. Dismissal, suspension, or discipline. And this could relate to a student, and there are additional laws that school boards must follow when it comes to student privacy and student identity. If it's an employee, the employee has the option of saying, I want this matter, dealt with in public. It does not have to always be, but the board must set it up in closed session. Oh, so I've already referred to, and both of you mentioned the motion. I move to go into closed session to address. Now, they're not going to say the property we're selling that we don't need anymore. It won't be there. It is often unsatisfying to the observer because we want to know what they're doing and we can't find out what they're doing. So most often, 99% of the time, in terms of what I've seen and or observed and had board members share, and Karen mentioned it, I moved to go into closed session pursuant to Section 8A. It's a code that if you had the list, by the way, the sections that are allowable are in front of you. I just chose not to put the different numbers and letters. Didn't think it was necessary, but that is what they're required to do. Now, no decision can be made when the board goes into that spot. The board basically is exploring, learning more, asking questions. The board even can't, okay, everybody, are we done with closed session? Is everyone ready to leave? The board can't even ask that in closed session because, oh, are we all ready to leave? That's a deliberation. So the chair will literally have to astutely observe and know mind meld fashion or in consensus. And when coming back to the board table, as Judy said, there may be a motion and there may not be. If there is a motion, it might be, I move to accept the recommendation of the attorney presented in closed session. Now that was done intentionally so that the subject or the outcome are not revealed. And it's quite unsatisfying. There will be minutes made of the closed session. The minutes will be sealed in an envelope before the closed session is over. They will be handwritten. And in 1 year and a day, that envelope will be destroyed. Not for the regular public meeting minutes, but for the closed session. Right, so a second reason, complaints, and again, against a board member or an employee, and again, For that one, there are times when the individual might say they wish to have that matter discussed in public. For a personnel evaluation, that's a possibility. Strategy and negotiation, always. In making decisions about, what are we going to match the pay increase this year with what we did last year? None of those will ever be discussed in public. That would be an example. Purchasing or leasing property. Legal consults and applications for employment or appointment. And that would include in relationship to the superintendent or possibly an appointment if a new board member is going to be invited in. And occasionally there will be material exempt from discussion or disclosure.
We got about 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So public notice must be given. I already referred to minutes, but I want to say just a smidgen about public comment. Public comment is designed to be a monologue. It is not a dialogue with the board president. And what we'll also hear in a board meeting, you'll hear the board chair give an explanation of public comment, something like this. Public comment is dedicated especially for the board to hear from the public. Please state your comments, concerns, or questions. If you have questions, please leave your contact information, literally. So someone will go up to the microphone. Oh, and by the way, most districts have a time limit on public comment. And the time limit and the process for public comment will be included in the school district bylaws, and they will also issue those in a meeting or state those at the beginning of the meeting. Many members of the public are frustrated by this because, well, answer my question now. That is not how school boards deliberate. They need time to be able to process. It happens to be one rather unsatisfying for the public, but for a school board, it would be exactly what they would need to do. You'll see the superintendent or the assistant furiously taking notes. Board members are asked to give their full and rapt attention. And for some of us, this is where we may see some distress or even disorder in today's climate. Here are additional resources for any of us, any who might be interested. The Open Meetings Act Guide, if you Google those words, it'll pop up to the top. For anyone who wants to see the research behind what makes an effective school board, if you put those words in a Google search, you'll get the full, it's not overly comprehensive and it's written in everyday language. It's not the detailed data, but it is a high level presentation. The Oakland County Schools, the intermediate district, has great information available. Please take advantage of that. I'd also encourage you to look at the Michigan Association of School Boards, specifically the link here, Get on Board. Everything we're getting here is publicly accessible, as well as the important link to the LWVOA school board links that will have the link of all the districts. The Oakland Schools District is included a little higher on the list. And because we may likely have a colleague or two in Troy, if there is someone who is going to cover Troy, I wanted to make sure that was here as well. So at this point, I'll say thank you for your attention.